As the sun rises over Springwatch, the cast of 2023 consider their next moves. Cannibalism or kindness? Beneficence or bullying? Greed or carrying on in the face of adversity? It's the story of modern life, live for the next hour. Welcome to Springwatch.
Hello!
Yes, welcome to Springwatch, and look at this. For the third week running, we start in sunshine.
Look at it, blue skies and gorgeous.
Oh, God, caravan full of puffer jackets that haven't seen the light of day. What an extraordinary thing. Yes, we're back here for week 3. We've had a great couple of weeks so far. If you haven't seen those programmes, let me show you where we are. We're at the very beautiful RSPB Arn Reserve on the Isle of Purbeck in Dorset, between Weymouth and Bournemouth. And the reason that we've come here is that this place is super biodiverse. There's lots of different species here because there's a great range of habitats. And one of the most important is sandy lowland heath. And we've been looking at the bird specialists which breed here. And I'm pleased to say we've got a new live nest coming up this week, and I can show you the birds now. Here they are, stonechats. The male is a very striking bird indeed. Look at that. Female, less so, but a busy bird. Here you can see food in the beak because, yes, we do have a camera on a stonechat's nest hidden down in the heather here at Arn, and we've been watching the adults going backwards and forward to that. And here's the female, look, brooding as we speak and hopping away, revealing those chicks. But we're only going to tantalise you with these now. We will be coming back to that nest later in the week.
Beautiful bird, and what a beautiful weekend. Most of the time it was glorious, wasn't it? Hope you got out and enjoyed the blue skies and the sunshine, although I do know that some of you had thunder and lightning as well. So what did we have here at Arn? Well, it started off very hot, got to 26 degrees. What did that mean for our chicks on the nest? It meant they were feeling hot, hot, hot. It was all about keeping cool, panting away. I'm sure it was incredibly stuffy for our kestrels in their nest box, really feeling the heat. Then on Sunday we had a little bit of drizzle. That'd be the first time a lot of these chicks will have felt rain. Nothing really to write home about. And birds like our nightjar were just feeling a little bit damp. But pretty glorious generally.
Glorious, but we could do with some rain, you know. Things are pretty dry here. We had a bit of rain back in Southampton at the weekend.
Bit of rain?
Yeah, bit of rain.
Well, you took a DJ impression there.
I don't know. I don't know why that came out like that. I rather wish I hadn't done it now because you've drawn attention to it in front of the nation and made me look like a bit of a buffoon. Thanks very much. Let's move swiftly to our live cameras. Here are 9 of them. Look at this. What a spread of nests that we have here. Absolutely superb. Absolutely superb. But before we delve into those, one of the reasons that we've come here to Arn is that it's part of a super-national nature reserve, the first of its kind in the country. So it's not all about the RSPB here at Arn. There's plenty of other things slightly further afield. And Megs has headed down to the coast this evening to Durlston to find out a bit more about that spot.
Yes, I'm at Durlston Country Park, and what a beautiful sight this is. We really have been spoiled by the scenery and the wildlife here. Earlier on I was watching a kestrel hunting, not so successfully, but great to see. I've also had skylarks singing behind me, as well as the most intense electric flashes of blue, which is a species I will introduce you to a little bit later on. But of course it's not just Chris, Michaela and myself. Gillian is with us too, and she's up in North Wales.
Yes, we are in North Wales, still loving North Wales, I should say. It's an absolutely beautiful part of the country. Now, we are tucked away in a woodland on the Isle of Anglesey because this is one of the best places to come and see the island's one of its star species, the red squirrel. Now, red squirrels are also arguably one of the nation's most loved mammals. They are rare, they're locally extinct in most of the country, but here on Anglesey, they are going from strength to strength. It's an incredible story of recovery, of natural recovery as well. And I can't wait to share that with you. Chris and Michaela, we are starting week 3 on in North Wales with a really good news story.
We like that. We like a good news story from North Wales. We look forward to that, Gillian. Let's press on here. I'll tell you what, there was lots of drama last week. I mean, extraordinary things were happening, things which had possibly never been seen before. Let's go live to our nightjar's nest now. Because if you were watching last week, you'll know that the female, this bird here, ate one of its own young alive. And we were wondering why, and also wondering whether its other chick, they have 2 of course, will have survived. No signs there, live, but what a bird. And here, yes, I can reveal that the chick has survived the weekend. In fact, it's done more than survive. It's been doing very well, being fed by both parents. Here in the evening, we've seen the female leaving, the male arriving, flying in, calling, catching a moth. And as I say, both of those parents have been tending that young chick, which seems to be doing rather well. So what the cannibalism was about, we'll probably never, ever know. What a view of the bird. Look at the rictal bristles on its beak there. I love a rictal bristle. Here's the youngster, brilliantly camouflaged when it does pop out from under the brooding, the parent. I'm not sure what that little hop was about. But the adult remaining attentive, of course, throughout the course of the day. And this is a species that relies on its extraordinary camouflage to hide itself, hide the eggs that it's incubating, and then hide those chicks which it's brooding. But of course, there are a whole range of potential predators out there it's trying to hide from. Ground predators, foxes, badgers, stoats, weasels. But how about this? Here is a surprising potential predator. Look on the top left. A violet ground beetle approaches the nest. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, this is food for that female. She's essentially an insectivore. Why doesn't she eat it? But I ask you to cast your minds back to Autumn Watch last year, when we revealed that ground beetles like this had been seen killing and eating nightjar chicks. And as you can see, the chick soon moves out from underneath the female when the beetle arrives. She understandably gets a bit fidgety. We all do when we get a beetle under our belly, of course. Chick dives back in, the beetle comes out, but then goes back a second time, and we're all wondering at this stage, is this the moment where the little beetle picks on the bigger bird when the insects bite back at the insectivores? But no, the beetle actually emerges with another species of beetle, which it's killed and is carrying off, a cockchafer. Question remains, how many beetles can you squeeze under a brooding nightjar? What on earth?
Do you really think, though, that that chick might be too big for that beetle? I mean, the size difference is huge.
Yeah, as I recall, the chick that we saw being predated on that clip in Autumn Watch last year was a bit smaller. But what we've got to remember is that conditions are similar now as they were last summer. It's very, very dry, and the natural prey of those beetles, soft-bodied invertebrates, slugs, snails, earthworms, are not as available in the environment. So they do turn to other sources of meat, and it appears that nightjars are on the menu.
Well, but it's not the only thing, though, is it? I mean, there are loads of other predators as well that are lurking.
There are indeed. What about this? The nightjar on its nest, looking calm, and then all of a sudden, it tenses up. Listen. The telltale cry of a carrion crow. How has it spotted that nest? Well, perhaps it's that eggshell. Look, glowing bright white, not removed by the nightjar. Crow swoops down, nightjar strikes upwards. A clatter of feathers, the nightjar then mantling its young. The crow there in the background has been forced away from that chick and the nest, and it soon flies off, leaving the nightjar startled, but at least currently safe with its chick. But as we know, if you were watching over the last couple of weeks where we've had jays predating nest, once they find that nest, they never forget where it is.
Are you building jeopardy? Because I don't think we need jeopardy on this series. There's been so much drama.
Sowing the seeds of doubt when it comes to the survival of the final nightjar chick.
Let's catch up with our kestrel nest, because I'm pleased to tell you there's been no drama on this nest for the weekend. Here they are live in their nest box. Look at that though, Chris. It looks absolutely disgusting, doesn't it? There's so much bird poo seeping over the sides and on the walls. I bet it absolutely stinks in there. But as I say, there's been no drama over the weekend. This is how we left them. Look at the difference. Look at the difference. They're really fluffy on Thursday. Very downy feathers, all crammed in that nest box. Well, 3 days' time, they've grown a lot. You can see the adult feathers coming through. That's the male bringing food. And look, it's chaos in there once food is brought in. And this is a bit chaotic because the female then takes the food and flies out. And the chicks look a little bit bemused by that. Don't blame them. But look, this kestrel coming in is not the male. That was another female, which again is unusual. The mother female doesn't want this strange female around and is keeping a watch. Not really sure why that other female turned up, but perhaps it was just curious. Perhaps it had lost its own chicks and the calling of those kestrel chicks just triggers something and it wants to come and investigate. But as I say, the mother female kestrel is certainly not going to let that stranger female anywhere near her chicks. I don't think, though, I have to say, I don't think there's any danger of that other female attacking those chicks. I think it was probably just curious, wasn't it?
I think it was curious, but I would never rule out the D word when it comes to chicks in a Springwatch nest.
I know. I mean, it really has been very
Brave
odd
of you.
this year, hasn't it?
Indeed it has. OK, time to fly further afield. Let's go back to Megan and Durlston, where she's getting all a bit botanical tonight.
Oh. Well, I can't help myself, to be honest, not in a place like this, which is so beautiful in terms of its plant life. Now, of course, I'm here at Durlston Country Park, which is a national nature reserve. It's also a Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site, which is run by Dorset Council. Let me show you exactly where it is. Here we are, down here on the southeast coast, a little bit further away from Arn on this part of the Purbeck Peninsula. And it is a bit different. Down here is a lot of limestone habitat, whereas up in Arn, it's much more chalky. So you get a different part of species diversity. And there are so many fantastic species that make their home here, in the woodlands, in the meadows, and of course on the cliff tops too. The wildlife is truly fantastic. There's been over 3,000 different species recorded here. Everything from bird life, everything from plants, you name it, it's all been here, and it's been really fantastic to see that. Now, of course, we've got this diversity of habitat, which is really critical, and the plant life too is pretty spectacular. We've got orchids, we've got oxeye daisies popping up. It really is really remarkable as a meadow habitat, and we are losing our meadows particularly. Now, a study from the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland, it's published a 20-year study in March 23, and it was quite shocked actually by the results. So 53% of our native plants have sadly declined, and as a result, non-native plants outweigh our native plant species in the wild, which is a little bit of a concern. But here I've got something that's really interesting. So Durlston was established in the 1970s, and if I open this up, this is one of the diaries that the rangers have been keeping all this time, and every day they do an insert, and this one comes from the 24th of October 1978. Look, you can see slight woodpecker damage there, possibly to a great titnest. My scientist inside really tingles with stuff like this because I want to understand more about it. But sadly, as our meadows have changed and are drastically reduced, we get changes to our species as well, including one species called the Lulworth skipper. Now, this is a beautiful species of butterfly. It's one of our smallest species that we have in the UK. And it's really, really prominent here on the south coast of Dorset, where it's restricted. So its food plant is exclusively tall grass. It's also where it lays its eggs. And this habitat seems to be increasing, but actually the distribution of this particular butterfly isn't. And sadly, there has been a significant decline of 78% since the 1970s. Now, there is another species of butterfly I'd love to draw your attention to, which is called the Adonis blue. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned that electric flash. Well, this is the species I'm talking about. And I've seen 3 so far. Now, the males have got this really bright turquoise coloration. The females are a little bit less bright, but equally as beautiful. And they are a nationally scarce species, and they're restricted to this calcium-rich grassland. You can see that female there. The male is giving it his best chance, flashing that blue coloration, saying, hey, look at me, are you up for it? And she's kind of thinking, well, no, and I'm totally anthropomorphizing there. Obviously, we don't know what she's thinking, but she doesn't look that interested. But, you know, he's got to give it a bit of a go. Now, Butterfly Conservation released a report called the State of Butterflies 2022 report, and it really sadly depicted that we've lost 80%, well, 80% of our species of butterfly have declined since, well, 1970, which is really, really shocking, and we need to be caring for these really important insects across our ecosystem. So there's lots of things that we can all do to help a species like the Adonis, which needs short grasslands, as well as the skipper as well, the lower skipper, which needs tall grass. We need that diversity of habitats to help maintain them. Now, one thing we can all do in our gardens, it's simple as putting a pot of native nectar-rich plant seeds down. This will really help encourage a diversity of butterflies into your garden, helping that population. Another thing you can do is take part in Butterfly Conservation's Big Butterfly Count, which is happening towards the end of July. It's as simple as stepping out into your local patch and counting the butterflies around. But enter all data. If you have butterflies, brilliant. If you don't get any butterflies, obviously that's a sad thing, but do enter that data because no data is really important. So look out for that amazing citizen science campaign when it comes out. And all details are linked on our website for that. Now, of course, I've really enjoyed my time here in the meadow and getting to know the species, but there is one person who is more, well, should we say, botanically minded than me and who I learn so much from all the time. He is our resident botanist for the series.
My dad got me into birds and beetles when I was about 6 years old. We used to go bird watching in the winters, and in the summers we'd go out into the grass behind the house and try and find lots of different insects and spiders and things. I used to get so frustrated all the time because any butterfly or dragonfly or bird that I wanted to look at would immediately fly away from me. As a kid, this was just really annoying because I wanted to give them time and attention and love. I would just be left with these motionless plants at my feet, but the fact that they didn't move was by far and away the most exciting thing about them. I could stare at them for as long as I liked, and this just opened up this entire childhood of exploration. My name's Leif Sweden. I'm a botanist and basically spend my entire life trying to convince as many people as possible that our wild plants are awesome and completely worth our time and attention.
This is Delston Country Park on the Purbeck coast. It's one of the most species-rich areas of the country, and it's where my love for orchids first began.
Delston is a really, really exciting place for orchids because of its limestone grassland habitat. I'm really, really looking forward to having a wander around and seeing what I can find. Ooh, look. Green-winged orchids. Oh, wow. Oh, they're beautiful. They're so vulnerable to things like fertilizer and herbicides. So, like, the slightest hint of that and they just disappear. So really, really special to see. This one here looks like a completely different orchid, but actually the only difference is that this one has a genetic mutation, which means that it can't produce that lovely pink, purple pigment. That does mean you can see the green wings on the sides of each flower much more easily. So orchids do all sorts of incredible things, most of which most people don't even realise are going on. So for example, they spend the first part of their life cycle underground. We don't even see them. And at that point, they've sort of buddied up with the fungus, which provides them with all the energy they need in order to germinate and grow leaves and start photosynthesizing. So by the time you first see an orchid, it might be sort of 5, 6, 7 years old. And like, that's just so amazing. Ooh. Look, we've got early purple orchids. And this is another species I really like, and it used to have more than 100 names around the country, which is just a sign of how common it really was. Sadly, not anymore. Now, the early purple orchid is meant to smell like cat pee, but I'm not sure I can smell anything, but maybe that's because I'm not a bee. Oh, wow, look at these! So this is the plant I was really, really hoping to find today. These are early spider orchids, only really found in 3 places along the south coast of England, one of which is here on the Purbeck coast. So it's really, really special they're here. Early spider orchids are so cool. They're only pollinated by one species of bee, the buffish mining bee, and they've evolved to exploit the sexual desire of the male of that species. Now, to a male bee, the flower of an early spider orchid looks, smells, and feels exactly like a female of its species. So as you can see, she's completely tricked the male into thinking that this flower is in fact a female. So it's part of a group of orchids that do this, but there are only 4 species in this country which have evolved this mechanism.
It's so rare that this behaviour has hardly ever been filmed. This nearly 30-year-old footage shows the extraordinary process in a close relative of the early spider orchid.
What happens is you've got a male bee flying around and he's got one job, which is to find a female to mate with. So he comes across a population of orchids and he sees what he perceives to be a female resting on the flower with her head buried amongst the petals. And he thinks, great, this is my lucky day. He attempts to mate with the flower. Now, while he's doing this, the orchid drops 2 little sacs of pollen onto the back of the bee. But after a while, he decides to buzz off in search for a more enthusiastic partner. So once again, he comes across a new population of orchids, immediately falls for the ruse all over again, and in attempting to mate with this next flower, deposits the pollen onto the female part of the flower and pollinates the orchid. And this entire fraud is masterminded by a plant, and I love it when the plants get one over on the animals. Delston has 578 different plant species growing here, and each and every one of those just brings me so much joy. As amazing as these places are, they are so few and far between, and it is really sad to think about that, and it's just one of the many reasons why we need to protect them.
Absolutely love those orchids, but spare a thought for that poor male bee, all that effort for nothing. Well, welcome back to North Wales. We are continuing our journey through North Wales. Last week we ended on the Llŷn Peninsula, that's jutting out into the Irish Sea, and over the weekend we moved and relocated to the Isle of Anglesey, right in the middle of Anglesey to Nantty Pandy. That's where we are tonight. Now, Anglesey is Wales's largest island at 276 square miles. Once it was completely cut off from the mainland by the Menai Strait, those vast tidal currents of the Menai Strait. The whole island has a very unique character, and where land meets the sea is where it's at its most dramatic. Now, this is where all sorts of bird species, things like sandwich terns, arrive here from West Africa for their spring migration. Choughs are also found here patrolling the coastline, making the most of open pasture, soft ground where they probe into the ground, and towering sea cliffs, mostly on the north and east coastline, home to seabird colonies. Things like fulmars will be nesting here, razorbills, beautiful, beautiful puffins, and perhaps some of the more familiar species. There you can see a crow foraging in the seaweed there on the shoreline. Now, we'll be seeing more about those seabirds of this amazing island, but tonight we're at Nantty Pandy because this is one of the best places to see one of the star species of the island, also one of Britain's most threatened species. And a few days earlier, I caught up with a man who, there's no exaggeration to say, helped to bring this species back from the brink.
This may look like your typical British woodland, but there are ruby treasures hidden up above. These animals were once common and widespread throughout Britain, but now they are rare, threatened, and incredibly hard to see. I am, of course, talking about red squirrels, and here on Anglesey, they are thriving.
By the mid-1990s, the red squirrel population here was like most places in the UK, struggling and on the verge of extinction. In fact, in these woods, there were only 40 individuals left, and the genetic diversity of the population was at rock bottom. But thanks to the efforts of conservationists, Anglesey now has one of the strongest and most genetically diverse populations of red squirrels in Britain. Dr. Craig Shuttleworth from Bangor University is one of the leading scientists behind this incredible success story.
So how did the conservation efforts begin?
It was a lot of hard work. I mean, mainly removing grey squirrels, because there were a lot of grey squirrels on the island in those days. So we're creating space for the red squirrels to move into. But also we had to get the community involved because you require land access and public support, and people had to understand what it was we were doing. This all predated social media, so if you want to get your message out, you had to go and knock on doors, talk to people, get them to act as ambassadors for you and spread the word that way.
So it's literally boots on the ground, knocking door to door, getting the community involved.
A huge amount of community support and understanding. And what's special about Anglesey, I suppose, is that people now, they're empowered with the confidence to manage and understand the local population. They don't need us anymore, they're experts.
This work has spanned 2 decades, 20 years. Obviously, genetic sequencing has also come on massively in that time. How has that affected the conservation efforts?
We were lucky right at the beginning to work with Bangor University. Their geneticists looked at the small population that was left in the 90s. And what they found was they were very inbred. So our decision was then to bring in new genetics, and we made the decision to bring in as much genetic variation as we possibly could find.
So you say bringing in genetic variation, you mean literally bringing in more red squirrels?
Yeah, all sorts of types of red squirrels,
Yeah.
European, continental types. We brought in some animals that were from Scotland, a real mix. And so when you look at the animals here, you'll see the actual coat itself, ovarian structure. They look different, and that's reflecting this immense genetic diversity.
So what about the future for red squirrels on Anglesey?
They're doing really well.
Yeah.
We have some challenges. We have some unsympathetic habitat management, and we need to try and work to resolve that. Obviously, grey squirrels still try to come over onto the island, and they bring the risk of squirrel pox. But in terms of success, people love these animals. Yeah. They've really, really taken them to heart, and they've taken ownership of them. They're really proud to have them in their gardens and locality. They do their own PR. They do their own PR. It's a fantastic animal, and you know, you couldn't want for a better kind of ambassador for challenging biodiversity crisis. We nearly lost this animal, and now it's back.
Absolutely brilliant success story. And Craig's going to be joining us later live on the show, because Chris, Michaela, there's going to be an update for Bella the pine marten. I don't know if you remember Bella, but there's a really good update about her.
Excellent stuff. Can't wait for that. Big pine marten fan, I've got to say.
Yeah, red squirrels and pine martens. Bring on the mammals, eh?
I know.
Bring on the
Pine
mammals.
martens are super, super things.
Now, we've done an update on a couple of nests from the weekend that are doing pretty well, but if you were watching our live cameras online and on TikTok, then you may have seen a shocking drama playing out, and it was with this nest. It was our buzzard nest. If you're watching last week on the show, you know that we've got 2 chicks, and you can see one is considerably larger than this smaller one. The larger one's about 30 days old, the smaller one only 3 days younger, we think, but considerably smaller. And you can see here the adult is feeding the big chick first, the smaller one is begging, and it's only once that bigger one has had enough that the smaller one gets any of the tidbits. And there has been a lot of fighting, as you would have seen last week in that nest. So let's have a look at that nest live right now. And you'll see that there's only 1 chick left. So what happened to the other chick? Well, before I show you, I will warn you, because it's pretty shocking, it's not pleasant, and it's a little bit upsetting to watch. But this is what happened. This is what we witnessed. This is Saturday in the morning. A slow worm is brought in. And you could see the little chick is feisty. It's up, it's healthy. The big chick scoffs that slow worm down. And then it has an intention. It pins its sibling down, and it seriously attacks it. And this is the most vicious and sustained attack that we've ever seen on the watches. As I say, we saw it last week, and it went from them attacking each other to feeding to resting. And that continued to go on. But this was a 2-hour sustained attack. But first of all, that little chick fought back, and then it just got so brutal, and it eventually fell out of the nest, and it dropped to the floor and obviously didn't survive. And as I say, it lasted 2 hours, and for our nest watchers watching, it was really awful to watch. And I know some of you were watching it at home and got quite upset before we didn't go quite so close up on those cameras. But shocking stuff. I mean, we've had buzzards before, but we've never seen anything like that with buzzard chicks, have we?
No, we haven't. So why does it happen, do we think? Well, food shortage would be the obvious thing if they were fighting over food. But they seem to have been fighting when they've had full crops. However, having said that, in the past, when there were far more rabbits in the UK, they were a principal food source for buzzards, and if a buzzard brought in a rabbit, it wasn't just one meal in a nest, it would last some time. We've only seen a handful of rabbits being brought in. There they had a snow worm, frankly not a lot of meat on a snow worm, so food might have been implicated. But the other thing we've got to accept is that animals have different personalities, different characteristics. I mean, just because they've come out of 2 buzzards' eggs don't mean that they aren't, you know, A and B. Think about your pets. If you've got 2 cats, 2 dogs, they're very, very different in their personalities. It may well be that we've just got an extremely aggressive buzzard in that nest.
Ferocious, but I'll tell you what, that's going to be a successful hunter, isn't it?
I'll tell you, when it fledges, I'm not going out. I'm just going to stay in. Let's go live to our cuckoo, which is another nest we were watching last week. And there you can see this bird. And look, there's the one of the host birds, a meadow pipit, has come in and is feeding that cuckoo live. Look at the extraordinary size of that orange gape. And now you can appreciate the size of the bird. Disappears with that fecal sac, still doing their duty. But you can see there's not a lot of space in that nest now. A relatively small nest meant to be holding little meadow pipits, not giant cuckoos like this. It's stretching its wings, fanning its, albeit short tail at the moment, but it really is running out of space, which suggests that it might be fledging relatively soon. Fledging to the extent that it won't be flying, but it will find somewhere out of that nest to climb up onto so it can still be fed by those adult pipits. And they have been extraordinarily diligent, coming in, satisfying all of its needs, feeding it insects, of course, as they would feed their own young. Here you can see it begging, and then it, I mean, look at that, look.
No, I'll tell you, if it eats the pipit, if the cuckoo eats its mother pipit, then that's it. I'm done, that's enough.
Right, well, thankfully, we've never ever heard of that being recorded before, and I think we're unlikely to see it. I think what we are likely to see in the next couple of days is this bird needing more space, breaking out of that nest and popping up on a gorse bush nearby. What's interesting is that, of course, when the pipits fledge, they're fed by their parents for a relatively short period of time, but the cuckoo will be attended by those 2 adults for another 2 or 3 weeks. And one of the reasons is that it's got this constant call that it's giving. And you can see here, Pete Walkston's photograph shows you how by this stage, the young cuckoo is dwarfing the meadow pipit, which is perched on its back to put food into its mouth. So yeah, the constant cries and that big orange gape continue to prove irresistible for the pipits when it comes to feeding the cuckoos.
It is a mad photo, that, isn't it? But, you know, I mean, this has been a crazy season, hasn't it? So anything could happen. I mean, who knows? Maybe it will swallow its meadow pipit host whole.
Well, it
Bring
will be
that
a first.
update tomorrow. OK, let's head down the coast to Megs, who's looking at seabirds who are nesting on the cliff. Megs.
Oh, Michaela, it's one of my favourite things to do, visit a seabird colony. It's the sound, it's the busyness, it's the hustle and bustle of life on these cliffs, which gets me really intrigued. And I've made my way down from the meadow to Dalston's limestone cliff face, where there is fantastic avian biodiversity to be seen. And we wanted to bring it to you live. So we've got our wonderful wildlife long lenser, James Stevens, out. And he's got his eye, or lens I should say, on a very interesting nest. Now he went out a little bit earlier on and found a nest of peregrines. Look at that, one of the adults there having a look around. Now I can say that there are 4 chicks in this nest. They're looking quite developed, and the adult has just been sat there, mainly provisioned by the mum. The male has been a little bit more laid back in the caring of the offspring. But it's really fantastic to see these predators here. Maybe not so fantastic though if you happen to be one of the seabirds that lives below them. And there's so many brilliant species like that. For example, we've got razorbills, guillemots, fulmars, so many different gulls as well. There you've got our guillemot community. It's really interesting to see these species up close, and to hear it and to smell them is certainly something interesting. Obviously, they're important indicator species. Their health tells us about the health of the ocean. We know that if our seabird colonies are doing well, then it all thumbs up. And here we've got one of the peregrines coming in. This was footage taken a little bit earlier on, coming in to feed the youngsters. And this is when you can see how well developed they are. That's the female that's brought in the food. She's a little bit paler, and there are the chicks. Now they've got their flight feathers in. They will be soon probably ready to fledge. They're flexing those flight muscles, making sure they are nearly ready to go. And there we are. Beautiful with their down feathers as well. Now you can only see 3, but there was a 4th one tucking his way well behind there. But the rangers here, of course, have been monitoring the populations of seabirds for a really long time, and their records go as far back as to 1993, where they started using remote cameras to survey the population. Now, we've taken a look at some of that footage, and this is some recent images that we've taken that we found particularly fascinating. Now, the one thing you'll notice about guillemots is that they don't have nests. Now, they lay their eggs directly onto the rock surface, and look at the density, the crowdedness of that rock ledge there. So guillemots are actually one of the species with the smallest nesting territories, and 20 pairs can reside in about a metre squared. And I wouldn't have believed that until I saw that footage then. They really do cram on in together. They live in colonies, obviously safety in numbers. But when you live in a social group, you have to have mechanisms in order to tell whose egg is whose chick is whose. Now, I happen to have some guillemot eggs down here with me, and look at the variety of them. It's really interesting. So here, these are 2 replicas, models that have been painted, but these 4 are real ones. Now, we've got this white one here, a few speckles there, we've got a beige one, a few more prominent markings on the side, and my personal favourite, these beautiful turquoise blue ones. And again, very different speckleding. Now, the way that egg production works means that actually the coloration and the speckleding are the last things that go onto the egg before it's laid. And it is, as you might remember in last week's programme, like a signature. It's exactly the same as that cuckoo egg. So all of these individual patterns are unique to an individual female. And of course, you don't want to spend lots of different energy investing in the neighbour's offspring. You want to look after your own. So it's basically a case of natural selection. It's evolved to be that every individual lays its unique barcode or signature onto the egg so that when it returns, it can remember which egg is its. It gives it reproductive success, better chances of fledging offspring into the next year. And also it will reproduce essentially that pattern the next year and the next year. So it really is individual focused, which is really a cool adaptation. Now, what happens when those chicks fledge and grow up? Well, something a little bit dramatic. So here we are in our guillemot colony, and the chicks are, well, they develop relatively quickly. They can fledge just at 21 days old, and you've got some big feet on a little guillemot chick there, but for very good reason. Now, these guillemot chicks will not fledge, semi-fledge out on a tree or into a nice soft bush. They will launch themselves out into the ocean before they can even fly. Now, what's the purpose of doing that? Well, a study in 2017 found that the guillemots that launch themselves into the ocean before they can fly actually have a similar mortality rate than the ones that stay on the ledge. So there's not much difference. However, interestingly, if you do find yourself a jumper and you want to jump into the ocean, then what happens is the parents are much more likely to feed you more often than if you're on the ledge. Why? Well, I don't really know, but it means you can grow a lot faster and learn what guillemots do best a lot quicker before you can develop those important flight feathers and take off and do what guillemots do best. Now, of course, I'm out looking at the ocean. It's one of my favourite, most relaxing views of all time. And diving below the waves like seabirds do, they get some really interesting insight. There's a lot of alien life out there, but none more alien, I'd argue, than the jellyfish.
It's early spring, and around our coastlines, all eyes are on the water. Because just below the surface, things are getting busy. Sea stars stretch their arms, all 5 of them. Crabs jostle over scraps. And amongst this motley crew are some of the strangest life forms in the sea. Jellyfish, polyps. They're anchored to rocks around our coastline in their hundreds of thousands. Feeding on passing scraps of plankton, it's thought that jellyfish polyps can live like this for many months or even years. Here on the bedrock, they're biding their time, waiting for the perfect environment, like water temperature and an abundance of food. And then, when conditions are perfect, the polyps transform, morphing into a daisy chain of segments. Now, they're no longer polyps, but strobila. As they grow, they start to dance. A strange, pulsating jig. A prelude to something remarkable. Ever so gently, the uppermost disc breaks away, and a new baby moon jellyfish drifts off in the current. One by one, every single disc in the strobila follows suit. Their dispersal is timed to perfection, to coincide with the UK's springtime plankton bloom. And with food in such abundance, the jellyfish can grow rapidly, nearly 6 millimeters a day. They now have their distinctive bell shape, eye spots that can detect light and dark. And tentacles lined with stinging cells, perfect for paralyzing their planktonic prey. After just 3 months, they develop into their final form. Medusa. These mature adults are 95% water. They have no brains, no bones, and no blood. The rings in the top of the bell are their reproductive organs. With every contraction, they propel themselves through the water. Sometimes, when food is especially plentiful and water temperatures are just right, moon jellies form colossal crowds, known as blooms. They may live a nomadic life, but it's anything but lonely. They spend most of their time close to the surface, creating a cosmos of luminous disks. It's not difficult to reproduce with so many mates nearby, and once the eggs have been fertilized, the larvae will sink to the sea floor. These moon jellies will never see their offspring, because those polyps will be safely nestled on the bedrock, awaiting their own perfect time to shine.
Well, from amazing alien underwater life to a more familiar woodland habitat. Now, 2 weeks ago, when we were still up in the rugged woodlands of Ireri, Snowdonia National Park, we introduced you to Bella, the pine marten. Now, we all fell in love with Bella. She was absolutely amazing. Captive bred female, very, very cute, but fierce, let me tell you, very fierce and wild in nature. Now, Bella means pine marten in Welsh, and she was bred as part of a project called Magical Mammals, funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And this was to help recover the threatened mammal species of North Wales. And Bella, next year, will be reproductively active, and the idea is to release her into the wild so that she'll attract breeding males into her territory and help to extend their range through North Wales. So a superb plan, but did it go to plan? So last week we sent our wildlife camera operator, Steve Phillips, with bated breath, fingers crossed, in the hope that we would film the release and capture her first steps into the wild. Well, step one was to open up that enclosure, a little opening there. We weren't sure whether she would be brave enough to venture out, and after a few attempts, away she went. And she was quite bold. She very quickly started to explore the immediate area around her enclosure. Now, just bear in mind that every single moment from this point forward was a new experience for Bella. So even those holly leaves that she's sniffing out there, you know, you wonder whether she was surprised that they were prickly. Perhaps, we don't know, but she was very alert, very attuned to her environment, and so exciting to see Bella for the first time out in the wild. Now, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Craig Shuttleworth. We saw him earlier with the red squirrels. Craig, you were also involved with Bella the pine marten. Now, I know these two species, their range may one day overlap. Pine martens are predators, red squirrels are on the menu. How's this going to play out?
Well, we shouldn't be too worried. Pine martens are going to take the occasional red squirrel, but if they caused a problem, that really would be significant in terms of habitat, insufficient habitat for the reds. If you had a few reds, you could see how pine marten might have an adverse effect, but really the big win is pine martens' impact on grey squirrel. They depress grey squirrel numbers, and reds recover.
Right. So they will potentially have a positive impact on red squirrel populations. Now, Craig, I know today is the first time you're actually seeing some of the release footage. For you, this is the end of, 5 years of really hard work. Yeah. Let's just take a look a little bit more of that footage. I just want to know, how does that make you feel to just see Bella out there? I mean, for the first time in the wild.
It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, beaming from year to year, it's great to see her out. So natural, so relaxed in the woodland. And it's to the credit of Richard, who's looked after her all these months. You know, she's really doing well.
Yeah, I mean, she really looks like she's so comfortable in that environment. Look at her climbing up that vertical trunk, obviously supremely adapted to this arboreal lifestyle, like a duck to water, isn't it? Look at her climbing out on that branch. She's
amazing. I mean, it's just the confidence of the animal. This is her first time out. I mean, the first steps. It's really remarkable.
And she's got that very distinctive orange patch on that pale bib. Now, is that going to be useful, do you think, in being able to keep track of her once she's in the wild?
Really useful, because part of the project is about getting people involved in monitoring these animals. So if you've got an individual with a distinctive mark, it's easily identifiable, and then they can tell us if they've seen her.
Absolutely. And I know people are going to worry that she might be lonely, but they're solitary animals, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're territorial, they live their lives basically alone. She won't tolerate another female coming into her territory. She will tolerate a male, though, and the male would overlap her and potentially a female next door. So they're not all alone, but they are pretty much on their own most of the time.
Yeah, and of course the hope is that she will eventually pair up with a male next year and start to breed and establish a territory for herself. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I feel very excited, very privileged that we've all been able to see these first steps into the wild. This is like the cherry on the icing on the cake. Amazing, amazing recovery story. Chris and Michaela, what do you make of that? Pine martens, wild in North Wales.
It's
Fantastic stuff. Those sort of proactive conservation projects like that, which pay immediate dividends if they're appropriate, you know, reintroductions are very, very exciting. Mass public appeal, great support from Heritage Lottery Fund as well. Thank you very much for that. Be nice to get them spreading out in other parts of the UK as well, though, wouldn't it?
And reintroductions and rewilding really gives you hope, doesn't it, for the future of our natural world? And that's what they've been doing here at Arn, rewilding. It wasn't always like this, with so many different habitats. And a couple of days ago, I met up with site manager Peter Robertson to find out about the history of the management of RSPB Arn. Peter, you're now the site manager, but you first came here at 16 as a volunteer in the early 80s. So you must have seen huge changes.
There's been massive differences in terms of the habitats. There's been huge improvements. The place we're walking at the moment was a dense forest plantation back then, and it's just been converted to heathland over the last 5 to 10 years, and wildlife's kind of flooding back into it. Woodlarks are doing well, all our reptiles are doing really well. We had our highest ever number of nightjars last year, 60 pairs. Our Dartford warblers have gone from, well, 2 pairs here when the RSPB first acquired Arn back in the mid-60s, up to 90 pairs last year, which is fantastic. So all those kind of heathland specialists that really rely on this incredibly rare habitat are doing fantastically well, which is really exciting to see.
Well, listen, Peter, I've got up early for a reason. I've come here to see a Dartford warbler, because that's what you promised me that I'd see.
Yeah, let's see what we can do.
Is this the sort of area that you've seen it before?
Yeah, I was out yesterday and there's a nest somewhere in among this patch of gorse, and both adults were feeding their young really actively, so we should be lucky and get a sighting of them flying in or flying out.
And that's what we're hoping for, isn't it? Nice
is.
Dartford warbler on top of the gorse, sitting there looking beautiful.
Well, it'll be in the gorse bush, sitting on top, is a whole other matter.
I guess it's good to listen out for the sound as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the little kind of rasping alarm calls are a really good giveaway sign.
Oh, look, there, on top of the tree, on top of the tree. Oh, exactly where we want to see it.
Oh, fantastic.
It's just perched beautifully for us. Look at that. Since this whole area's been managed, they have done really well. Why is that?
It's the size of the habitat, it's the condition of the habitat. There's a huge area here, not just at Arn, but kind of in the wider landscape. It's about the insects, it's about the structure and all those things that kind of mean they can survive all year round.
They don't migrate, and they don't do well if it gets really cold. So they need those mild winters to be able to survive.
Yeah, but we do still get some cold winters. So the beast from the east a few years back, Dartford warblers in some other areas dropped quite significantly after that, but here where we've got loads of great gorse habitat, they managed to survive the winter without losing significant numbers in the population.
The gorse must give them good protection in those cold
It does,
winters.
because it creates this little microclimate. The temperature's warmer in there than it is around. Even on the rare occasions when we get snow, there'll still be insects, spiders and things active in the gorse bushes that are enough to keep the Dartford warblers going over winter.
Having watched them on our live cameras, we know that they're good feeders, so as we know the nest is there, these are going to come back quite a few times within an hour, aren't they, with food for their chicks?
Yeah, they'll be backwards and forwards all the time.
They're a bit quick this morning, though, aren't they?
Well, that's what they do. They dash about like mad little things.
We've had plenty of successful breeding here. We've seen it actually on our programme. It's the only nest that's done really well so far, with all of them fledging.
Yeah, it's been fantastic to see, and it gives a whole perspective that we don't normally get. You know this stuff happens, but you never get to see it, and so to see that is amazing. It's been really great.
It really has. Good to see a positive ending to that story.
Oh, this one just flowed across the track, track, just... and singing. Can you hear that song?
What a great finale! Absolutely loved my morning. Great to see a Dartford warbler, but also great to meet Peter. Do you know he started here as a volunteer when he was 16? Guess what they had him doing?
Cleaning the toilets.
No, they had him cutting down rhododendrons.
Oh, well, that's a task. He's probably still doing it now. He's doing it when he's 96. Rhododendron's really difficult to get rid of. Hey, I tell you what, though, take a look at these photographs. John Hawkins from Surrey sent these in. This is a swallow feeding its young in flight. That's the youngster on the left-hand side. The adult is upside down. Remember, birds can't fly upside down, so it's flopped on its back in flight. And there you can see its head inside the youngster's mouth, feeding it in flight. So when it comes to aerobatics, can anything top the swallow?
That is
amazing.
extraordinary. You've never seen it before, have
I've
you?
never seen it before.
No.
Absolutely astonishing. And if you've got any other great photos, they don't have to be quite as remarkable as that, but we would love to see them. Send them into the usual places on our website and social media feeds.
That's set the bar high, hasn't it? OK, let's take a deep breath and enjoy a mindfulness moment. And let's enjoy some of the creatures that, just some of them I might add, that you might see on an old oak tree. Lovely bit of calm. I think we've got just time to have a look at all our different birds on our live nests. Let's see if anything catches our eye as we go to them. Let's have a look at our meadow pipits. Here we go, meadow pipits. There are chicks in there, meadow pipits with their own meadow pipit chicks, not with a cuckoo.
And they're looking pretty big, you know.
I know.
They might fledge.
Maybe they'll fledge with the cuckoo. Who knows?
Pretty close to it. We've got another new nest. We can tease you with it now. More of this coming tomorrow. This is a linnet's nest. And there you can see the adult brooding some chicks nestled down in the gorse. And this little finch has become quite rare in many places in recent years, so we'll get to know it a bit better over the next few days.
And let's have a very quick look at our barn owls. There we go, we've got chicks underneath that adult barn owl and an egg. We don't know whether that last egg is going to hatch, but maybe we'll catch up with it tomorrow. Lovely scene to end on. And as I say, we will be catching up with our live nest tomorrow, especially this impressive bird. It is, of course, the goshawk, and look at those chicks. They're ready to branch out.
And I'll be learning a little bit more about how bats echolocate.
I'll be heading to Anglesea's coast, where a long-distant migrant makes a home here in North Wales.
Sensational stuff tomorrow. Remember, if you can't take your eyes off of our cameras, you don't have to, because they're on from 10 in the morning until 10 p.m. at night, and you can find those on our website. Also on BBC TikTok. Take a look at that as well. Michaela's going to be joining Hannah for Watch Out at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Again, you'll find that on our website. Taking part in a rather unusual game where you have to remove the fecal sacs of a great tit.
Can't wait, can't wait.
You can't wait for that.
Tasty.
Other than that, of course, we'll see you tomorrow night for another Springwatch at 8 o'clock on BBC Two. Good night.
Bye-bye.
What can we do to help nature and the environment? Well, sometimes big changes come from little actions. The Open University is exploring how simple and effective measures can make a big difference. To get inspired, visit bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and follow the links to the Open University.